Hello everyone and welcome to this early access panel. We're here today to discuss about collaborating, educating and listening for patient groups more effectively with pharma companies. My name's Naomi Litchfield. I've got the honour of hosting this panel today. I'm joined by two wonderful women who share my passion for supporting patients and have an incredible amount of knowledge and expertise that they're going to share with you today. But I'm just going to start by telling you a bit about my background and where that started, which was paediatric clinical research nursing. I went into nursing because I was inspired by the care my younger sister received for her 4 rare cancers. I've had the privilege of caring for many rare patient and families on clinical trials and early access programs in the NHS, and I've administered lots of different types of investigational medicines and seen the real impact that they can have on patients' lives. I now work for Bionical Emas and I lead patient advocacy. I work closely with our internal teams, but also with patient organisations to ensure that the patient voice is represented and that also the patient burden is reduced. So I'm going to go over to Alix now, who joins us from Toronto, Canada, to tell you a bit about herself.
Thanks, Naomi, and thanks very much for having both of us here today. So I come from a background in kind of education and community outreach, and I work for a rare disease patient advocacy organization. As you mentioned, we are based in Canada, and we kind of focus on rare genetic metabolic disorders. So diseases like MPS, LALD, CLN2 Batten disease. And we operate from kind of 2 sister organizations. So the Isaac Foundation is considered our research entity, and that's kind of what we're best known as. So we are, fundraise and support research projects. We have several gene therapy projects that we've been funding that have now entered the clinical trial stage. Then our other kind of organization that works alongside the Isaac Foundation is Equal Access for Rare Disorders, which is a nonprofit, and that's kind of where we deliver a lot of our advocacy, our educational programming for patients, our patient support program, and the bulk of our work, which is around ensuring access to life-sustaining treatments for patients in need. So whether that's through clinical trials, that's approved drugs, or early access programs that we're hopefully going to be talking about today. And while we are based in Canada, being in the rare world, we are quite connected in a global sense. And I think a lot of the issues and themes that we'll be discussing here today really reflect that.
And then over to Christine, who joins us from Pennsylvania, US.
Hello, Naomi and Alix. It's great to be here with you today, and thanks for the opportunity. I'm Christine MacCracken, and I have the privilege of leading a group called Patient Strategies and Solutions at Janssen, which is part of Johnson & Johnson, in the Office of the Chief Medical Officer. Like Naomi, I began my career as a pediatric oncology nurse, and that was really where my passion for working with patients and their families was born. I worked in various other roles, but today our group is responsible for implementing bioethically based strategies for pre-approval access, compassionate use, or expanded access, whichever term is appropriate for the country under development across the Janssen pipeline. And I look really forward today to talking about ways that we've worked with the patient community and advocacy groups to make sure that we're responding to needs of the community and not perceived needs. Thank you.
Amazing, thank you so much. So yeah, just wanted to set the kind of context of early access, and that it's given lots of different terminologies in different countries. I normally refer to it as early access, and we call our EAPs at Bionical. And I know in the US it's termed as expanded access, and in Canada the special access scheme, which can be quite confusing for patients, families, clinicians, and also for us working in it, of which country and which regulation and what it's called. But just to say, it is for patients that with a serious or life-threatening condition that are wanting to access, so that's a pathway or mechanism, an investigational medicine, and that they've exhausted all other options. So there must be nothing else approved that they could have, or that there's a clinical trial that they're eligible for. So just to highlight those 2 important things before we start, and that we're then going to talk about the kind of complexities around early access or expanded access or a special access scheme for the 3 of us here today. And I'm going to go to Alix first from the patient group representative perspective to ask what are the main challenges and I suppose successes that you've encountered over the last few years when working with pharma companies, supporting your patients for early access or special access scheme, as Canada will term it.
So I suppose in terms of developing kind of successful relationships between patient groups, the patient community, and pharmaceutical companies, I think a lot of them involve kind of the same key traits, and whether we're talking about clinical trial development or early access programs or special access programs or whatever the name is, depending on where you are. I think in our experience, it's the companies that engage kind of from the earliest stage possible so that they can better understand patients' disease burdens. Patients' input can provide a greater sense of purpose and development and real insight into the reality of what it is like to live with a rare disease. And also the ability to set realistic expectations of what success looks like. And I think more and more we're seeing companies realizing that they need to do this when they're developing their clinical trial protocol. And what we're hoping to see also is that that kind of outreach and that connecting with patient communities and patient organizations is also happening for the development of early access programs. And Christine will be able to touch on this much more later on. But the importance of really thinking about these programs at the beginning as early as possible in the development stage and the trial stage as possible, and not just kind of tag on once your clinical trial is starting to wrap up. I think just remembering that, it's the companies that really understand that patients are a resource, they're not a burden, and genuinely considering the patient community as valued advisors. So whether that's developing clinical trial protocols or expanded access programs, because you're not going to find a more invested stakeholder than your patient community. And yeah, so, I mean, we have a lot of positive examples, and we have a lot of, more challenges that we've kind of encountered over the years. I think the main issues that we've had, whether it's about expanded access or kind of anything in general, is just when there's a lack of transparent information. So for expanded access, I think one of the main issues is a lack of transparency around timelines. That continues to be a problem when, patients are, especially when you are coming from a rare disease, patients and their families are up on Google in the middle of the night, and they're doing a lot of their own research, and they are becoming their own experts in the disease. And so when there is no information, or, there's no expanded access policy on a company's website, that's just information that the patient community doesn't have, and that just leaves more questions and concerns and worries, especially in situations where there are no other treatment options and there's a huge unmet need that a given drug could potentially provide for these patients and their families. And so I think what we see a lot with more of the challenges with working with pharmaceutical companies is when engagement either comes too late or it doesn't come at all, or situations, where patients and patient groups are left out of the conversation, or where companies kind of feign an interest in engaging with and listening to the patient community, and that kind of drops off as programs evolve. And in our case, I think perhaps most troublingly is when a company perhaps doesn't, they try to engage and then they don't like what a patient group has to say or their input that they have. And then what we've seen, and I think what a lot of other groups have seen as well, is patient groups can suffer negative consequences as a result of that kind of honesty and that transparency. And when a company doesn't like what they're hearing, which can potentially negatively impact the patient community.
Thank you so much, Alix, for sharing those insights with us. It's a great patient group perspective. And I'll come over to Christine now just to comment from a pharma company perspective. Thank you, Christine.
Sure, and thanks, Alix. It's always eye-opening to hear the various experiences that groups like the Isaac Foundation and other groups have. I think, certainly from our perspective, both personally and, from a company perspective, we look at what we call early and often engagement around really most things that reach patients, clinical trials, expanded access. I think for us, there's the biggest thing for me that I think about is expectation management. So, in reality, not all companies have the ability, as we know, to have the level of resources, that I feel very honored and privileged to have from J&J. All companies don't have that level of resource. But the one thing that we talk about a lot is everyone has the ability to manage expectations regardless of resources. So what I hope to see more of going forward, when you're talking about policy, is that even if you have a policy that you will not have programs, from a company perspective, we encourage colleagues to do so, to say openly and transparently, we are unable to have an expanded access program at this time, but we'll reevaluate, et cetera. It is a requirement, at least in the US, to have that policy. The adherence to that is at varied levels, I would say. It's high, but it's not 100% last time I checked. So that's one thing that we look at, when we're talking to other colleagues who are looking to get into expanded access. And there are a lot of individuals and companies who are very interested in doing this work for patients and with patients, but they lack resources or they lack the know-how. But again, asking questions, keeping expectations open when you're speaking with patient organizations like yours, so that people know, I can't maybe do everything or anything, that you ask me to do or that you ask us to change, but I will tell you what we can do and why we can or cannot. So, for me, the listening and the managing of the expectations and kind of talking about what I said earlier of filling actual needs, not needs that we think you have. So, and they may be mutual. We may have the same identified need that you actually have, but I don't want to see things being done, like a Me Too type of document or, this or that, something that organizations like yourself have already made. So just the listening just keeps coming back, for me and working with patients, their families and advocacy groups.
Thank you, Christine. And just to touch on a recent collaboration that we were all involved in, which was in response to patient and family requests for J&J. So a new kind of first of its kind EU and Canada guide for EAP regulations. If you could tell us a little bit more about that. And I know that we were very honoured as a partner at Bionical and that it was co-created with lots of patient groups. So yeah. Tell us a bit more.
Happy to do that. So this is called the Guide to Expanded Access, and it is for 28 countries in Europe and Canada. The reason that we created it was in direct response to patients telling us that they had really difficult challenge in identifying information about expanded access in their countries, down to the basic of, I don't even know if it is an option for me. I can't find information. I don't have, there's not a lot of websites, what have you. So we took a look at that, and it as a lot of things do, they take a little bit longer, than you want them to do them well. We were fortunate to partner with you, Naomi, and other colleagues at Bionical to collate. We can call it, people call it regulatory information. I call it information for people who are interested in learning more about expanded access in these countries. So it's made into a Q&A format. And I do say people, first of all, every patient is a person first. So I always say it is for people. So it's for anyone that's interested in learning more about it. Is it an option where I live? And if the answer is no, the questions of course stop, but at least the person who's in that country understands this is not an option for me. If the answer is yes, we go through a series of questions and answers that allows them to understand who, what, when, and how of those requests being made, primarily, working with your treating physician to talk about this as an option. And then there's certainly some background information, a dictionary for terms, as we've talked about already. Terminology is a huge I mean, it's an impediment. Let's be honest, in this work, it's very difficult for even us who work in this area to keep track sometimes of what program and what country we're talking about. So imagine, you know, you have no insight, thankfully, as I like to say for people. I hope you never need this option, but if you do, it should be as easy as possible for you to find information and seek this option for you or your family if you need it. So we just launched it in June. We had input from patients all over the world. Of course, we worked with your advocacy group. We worked with the Isaac Foundation to make sure that it was not just here's information, but to translate it into people-friendly terms so that it's easy to understand, including for us. I mean, I use it. I look at it frequently to see, oh, this is helpful. You know, there's good references. So that was a great. It was a great, I don't even want to call it an effort. It was a great thing for me personally, my highlight of my year, and maybe a lot of my years to do this for patients at their request. So we look forward to additional feedback, and I'm interested if anybody has gotten feedback, and we welcome all kinds of feedback. If you like it, if you don't like it, if you want other things in it, we will continue to evaluate that guide to make sure it is meeting patient needs.
Thank you so much, Christine. And yeah, and just to say that it was an absolute pleasure working with you on the guide, and that just to kind of advise patients and families or clinicians or whoever, people, as you say, reading the guide, that if you are new to early expanded access, then the glossary I find is a really useful resource that Janssen has put together. So to go to that first and maybe have a look at the glossary and understand some of the terminology and terms. And it is a really interactive guide that you can click on and go straight down to the highlighted word that can tell you the meaning and the different health authorities, and just to give a bit of background before going into the different countries. And yeah, and it was yeah, an inspiring and incredible resource to kind of be able to share. And I've personally had a lot of positive feedback with the advocacy groups that I've shared with, but also industry and clinicians. So if anyone listening today, it is on the CRDN Summit website, would like to click on it and have a little read. And if you have any questions or feedback, like Christine said, please email us, let us know. We want to you know, improve it or change or expand.
Please, yes.
We want to hear from you. And Alix, just to touch on your input on the guide and how the Isaac Foundation gave their input, and any kind of feedback that you can share from the community.
Yeah, of course. I think, you know, to begin, I can't emphasize enough from a patient perspective how much a guide like this was needed. You know, we are a relatively small rare disease organization based in Canada, and I would say at least 2 to 3 times a week we get requests from patients and their families across the globe, whether that's Europe, Asia, South America, of families who are desperate to potentially access an investigational treatment or anything, and there's nothing available where they are currently. And so having a resource like this is just incredibly important and helpful. And so, yes, we were very appreciative when you both approached our organization to provide some input and feedback. And so, you know, my colleague Andrew and I had our thoughts and our feedback, but then of course we sent it along to members of our patient community, you know, some of our board of director members who are parents themselves of children with rare diseases, and some other families as well. And so I think kind of what we were talking about in our interactions with pharmaceutical companies, what we hope to see with expanded access programs and the input in general, we weren't just listened to, patients weren't just listened to in this case, but like they were treated as, you know, experts in this space. And so kind of that respect and that kind of two-way street of communication. Whilst this is a resource for patients, I think patients are very much a part of its creation. I mean, they're why it was created in the first place, but we very much appreciated being a part of this and being able to allow our patient community to be a part of this as well. And the feedback that we've received, I mean, Christine, you were just mentioning just the different terminology and the kind of confusion and how helpful the glossary is. The rare disease patient community is, I mean, they're very well connected. you know, in Canada, some of our patient communities have a small handful of patients across the entire country. So they're connected with families in the States and in Europe and across. And often they get confused because they'll be speaking to somebody in the UK who has, you know, a potential program, right? They're like, oh, there's these expanded access programs in the States, but then here they're more familiar with the special access programs. And so that is just very confusing. And so to have a resource that kind of explains it all and gets everybody on the same page it's invaluable. And now, you know, the resource only went live a couple of months ago, but I've been able to send it out to patients when we get requests, and I'm able to look up specifically in their country and make sure I familiarize myself before I reach out to connect with them. And I know once I send it to them that they're going to send it to the other families that they know as well. So just thinking a grassroots kind of way of sharing information. I think that's really, really incredible, and we need to see more of this.
That's great. Thank you. It's funny you say the words grassroots, because that's where I mean, I think the work in this area is very much one, because it has to be almost, but it also just kind of organically becomes grassroots because it's a need program. You know, this isn't a program that is proactively taught to healthcare providers, or, you know, and that's we could do a whole other webinar on that, Naomi. But I think this is an area that when you need it, you need it. And anything, you know, we can do together to make it easier was really the goal. So I'm just thrilled to hear that it's being received by the people whom it was made for in that way. So thank you, and super thank you to both of you for all of your input. It was a labor of love, I think we called it at one point, Naomi, which is true. It's a real privilege to be able to put something like that together. So thank you both.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, just to say again, any questions and feedback from the audience, please let us know.
Please.
Yeah, I think we started with about 20 questions, didn't we, Christine, and got it down to 9. And, you know,
I think at some point we had like 30, and we just, you know, kind of kept trying to cull them down to what we thought, you know, would be the most critical for patients and families and even providers. And then, you know, we got down to that magic number of 9. 9. Not 10, 9.
No, there was 10, but
what's that?
It down. Yeah, and it's hard, and like you say, to have it in one place, I think is very valuable for families, because it's often in a time of need, and I think to expedite that in one place rather than going to lots of different websites and frantically trying to find the information. It's really challenging. So I really hope it can help as many patients and families, but also clinicians, physicians that are looking at that as an option. And just to highlight, it normally is the treating physician that has to request the access to the investigational medicine. So just to urge patients and families listening today, you know, take a look at that guide and discuss it with your treating physician. And expanded access could be an option for you. So yes, thank you so much. It's really exciting to be able to share that guide with everyone, and it is on the CRDN Summit website, so please download it, have a look, let us know. And then really just to kind of wrap up and give like key messages. You know, I'm hearing a lot about early engagement, transparency, listening, collaborating, but from different perspectives. So Alix, for you first, from a patient group perspective, if you were talking to and giving advice today to the patient groups that are listening, you know, it's hard to summarize in a few minutes, but what are the main things for, I suppose, rare patient groups starting that journey and looking into early access and wanting to collaborate with pharma companies? Some of your kind of top tips of how to start that from a patient group perspective.
Well, I mean, I think a theme of everything that we've all been saying today is try to engage as early as possible. You are already following the research, your patient community is already following the research. So try to have those conversations as early as possible, especially around expanded access. This isn't something that, you know, you want people to be considering as phase 3 starts to wrap up. You want it to be considered as early on as possible. And just find your person within the company. You know, for smaller companies, there might not necessarily be a direct patient kind of support or advocate representative, but
Mm-hmm.
I would like to clone Christine and make sure there's one of her at every single pharmaceutical.
Everyone probably wouldn't agree.
I would.
But we can do that. So
I don't know if I want a clone of me.
Like a million Christines all over.
Send all over the globe.
Yeah, that's what we need. Christine, I think you really are clearly such a leader in this space, and from conversations with other companies and smaller companies that we've been talking to, you know, your name always comes up, and the work that Janssen is doing always comes up. Your expanded access policy is the one that I'm like, take a look at. You really touched every kind of facet and point that needs to be addressed. And I think that the work that you and your team are doing is incredible. And I think it's clearly, hopefully, becoming more and more commonplace kind of in this space. So find your person within the company. Hopefully it's Christine, but if not, there's somebody there who will hopefully listen and give you the opportunity to properly engage with your patient community, and then go back to your patient community and properly listen to them and take what they are saying and then bring that to the pharmaceutical company and educate and empower your patients. Like you were saying, patients are often become the experts in their diseases. And so, you know, share resources like this expanded access guide and encourage patients to bring it to their treating physician and explore their options. And also just, you know, remain true to your organization and what your mission is, because I think you can get bogged down with a lot of other factors or politics, but yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing this valuable insight, Alix. And then Christine, from your point of view, from your pharma perspective, what would you say to new pharma companies coming into the rare space and wanting to engage with the patient community and some of your learnings that you've had over the last few years?
So, you know, I think the first and foremost is know your audience. You know, you both have covered that beautifully. Of people know a lot, sometimes more than I think they are given credit for understanding either their or a family member's illness. They're very invested for obvious reasons. As you said, Alix, you're not going to find a more invested stakeholder in this process than the patient or their family, and that's 1000% true. So I think remembering that when working with the patient communities and patients themselves is they are experts in their area, and they are no different than any other expert that you would reach out to from a therapeutic perspective or a process perspective. They are experts in their own area of expertise. I mean, this is why we all hire consultants, because they have a service we can't provide. And I think they're also, certainly, as we see right here, very interested and willing to share experiences to help other patients. So there's a huge level of altruism in the patient community. So listening, keeping things transparent. I think as a new company and even as an existing company, you know, ideal things to do are, you know, manage those expectations, circle back, talk about why you're asking for feedback, what you're going to do with it, and what you might not be able to do with it. I think sometimes there's a fear from a company perspective that if I don't want to upset a patient community, they're already, you know, going through a lot, and if I tell them that I can't do it, they'll be unhappy with us. And, you know, the response is always, they will be more unhappy if you do not tell them what is happening. And everyone understands no is an answer that is viable and appropriate sometimes. Yes is not the answer to all questions from any patient, anywhere, for anything. But if you say why no is the answer, it may not be the ideal answer someone was looking for. I mean, I kind of take it back to like when we were all 4. Why? You know, if you say no to a child, the immediate answer is why, you know, so, or the immediate question. And so I say, you just, not that by any means that we are treating people like 4-year-olds, but think like a 4-year-old. If you are told no as an adult, I always want to know, why are you telling me no? So it's the same calculus decision of how you interact with people. It's kind of using common sense in how you approach things, listening, transparency, and just, you know, being at the table, invested, is really what I would recommend people do. Just be yourself. There are people at the other side of the table sitting around with you, invested in helping themselves and other patients. And so you can never put yourself in someone else's shoes, really, but just try to empathize with that, what this person or persons are going through, to have a voice and, you know, lift the voice, you know, where you can.
So to kind of touch on Christine's point about how important it is for pharmaceutical companies to manage expectations, that is something that if you are, you know, you've been engaging with a patient community or a patient organization, that's something that we can help with, and we can kind of help disseminate that message and ensure that patients are kept up to date. You know, our organization, we're constantly running webinars and patient symposiums, so patients are already aware of the research and the progress that's being made, and so we are able to kind of help set those expectations. And like you were saying, just giving an answer is a million times more helpful than the unknown, even if that answer is no. And patients and their families are used to, you know, they're used to hearing bad news, and we'd like to change that, of course, but at least just give them the honest response. And if there is, you know, an explanation, then we can help kind of explain that explanation or why that is a no. But in our experience, patients have always just appreciated being told the truth and having that available, rather than kind of living in this limbo of the unknown.
Yeah, I think, you know, those are excellent points, Alix. Thank you. I think the other aspect from, you know, a pharma perspective and for the patient community is, you know, pharma and biotech live in a regulated environment. You know, there are real rules and restrictions around certain things that we can do. But again, I think it's part of that discussion of, you know what, we just can't do this because based on regulations today, this doesn't allow us to do this, but we might be able to do this, that, you know, that's still compliant and meets your needs, whatever that conversation looks like. Obviously, you know, as appropriate, you know, but letting people know if that's a reason. I think that is something that many people don't understand, that is sometimes a real cause of something not being able to occur, or limiting maybe what can occur, and that's just reality. So I think that understanding, again, it's like that mutual understanding of, you know, what are your challenges and what are my challenges? How do we get to the middle, and try to help you with the thing that you need in a basically a mutually beneficial and compliant way, so that you're helped, and, you know, we're doing it in a way that meets everybody's needs. So I think those two things dovetailing is important to understand.
Definitely. Thank you both for summarising those kind of collaborative efforts and what's really important to both the patient community and what's important to pharma, and how they need to be compliant and, you know, they want to effectively communicate. And I think I'm hearing the earlier you engage, the better. That's definitely what we kind of advise our sponsors to do. I mean, people might say preclinical is early, but it's never early enough, I think. And I think you guys, you ladies would agree, you know, before you even go into clinic, because I do really believe in what I've seen, again, working with patient groups, that to know their background and know their history, and what they've been through. Have they had expanded access programs before? Has it gone well? Has it not gone so well? You know the kind of landscape that you're going into. Is it a big rare disease community that have a lot of resources and capacity? Or is it a very small ultra rare where you've got parents around a kitchen table and not as much resources? Because you'll need to be able to educate and support, and going through all the clinical development and all the kind of different stages. But that's a massive mountain to climb. But even when you've done that, you've got the kind of the payer and the regulators and the reimbursement and everything else. There's like 2 mountains to climb. So if you're engaging with the community right from the beginning, and you're going through that together, and you're learning together and listening from each other, it's only going to be more successful. And also from a pharma point of view, if you do that well, and your reputation as well. Christine, thank you very much. You will then have that good reputation, and if you're going into other rare disease communities, you'll be able to help them with their clinical development straight from the beginning, because you'll have great resources, you'll have great kind of examples of working with other rare communities, because I personally think working in rare is incredible and it's exciting, and not anything more than, say, oncology, hematology, but often those patients, when they are diagnosed, do have something, and in rare, often, unfortunately, there is nothing approved, and there's no treatments. So expanded access can sometimes be even more valuable in this area, and I think that, you know, like Alix said as well, like there's no more invested stakeholder than these patients and these families. And for a pharma company coming into this area, you know, it's incredible to be in, to develop new therapies, new treatments, and new science, especially when it's first in man, and to, you know, the first time that you're able to kind of develop that in a certain community. So just to kind of, yeah, step back, and as Christine always says, these patients are people first, and, you know, think about it from your mum, dad, brother, sister situation. What would you want for them? And on both sides of pharma and the patient group, and how you can most effectively engage with each other, listen to each other, and learn.
Yeah.
So I hope we've given you some insights there.
Absolutely. I hope, you know, like you said earlier, I hope people feel, I think even in the last, you know, 5 years, there have been a lot of changes in the area relative to communication and transparency. I mean, I am part of a big team at Janssen that works on this. And, you know, if you work in this area, and this is for any company or any organization, you have a special interest in this area. This isn't a, you know, spreadsheet by day, you know, type of work. So you do have a vested interest regardless of your role. I'm lucky. I work with so many talented people and committed to patients. So I'm glad to see. I think that we have, you know, things are getting better. I think we have room. We always have room to grow. So I look forward to watching that growth with both of you as we go forward.
Thank you, and thank you both for joining me here today. It's been incredible to share your different insights, and yeah, really fascinating to hear. And I wish we had more time, but we don't. And I'm sure we could talk for hours about this, but I hope that yeah, it's given the audience something to think about. And any questions, please email us to let us know. We're here, and we'd love to hear any feedback about the EU and Canada guide. Because yeah, we're all excited to kind of have some feedback from anyone. So let us know. And yeah, just to say thank you very much, and if there's any other questions to feedback. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks, Naomi.
Thanks, Alix. Thanks, Christine.